All right, everyone. Welcome to another edition of your Rehab Power Hour. This is your community to engage in virtual rehab together, and a place to discuss all things neuro-rehab, from the science, the people behind it, and the individual journeys of recovery. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Nick Housley. Thanks so much for being here. Hopefully your weeks are off to a good start. We have a really great show for you today. It's great to see you all here, and thanks for sticking around me a little bit. We're a little bit late, so I apologize for that. But we had to get a couple of things up and running on our end. So as always, we welcome anyone recovering from neurologic injury, their friends, care partners, or family members, or also their clinicians to really engage in this awesome community that we have going here on the Rehab Power Hour. As always, a couple of announcements to start off. There's primarily three ways you can reach out to me during Power Hour and actually after Power Hour. So the first of those is actually on the live stream. I'll be watching this as we go along today. So if you have any questions or comments, let me know in the live stream right down there. And I'll be sure to answer your questions and bring up those topics for my guests. We have Dr. Steve Wolf back with us today, and I'll be talking about some really cool scientific data. And if you guys have questions for him or myself, if you want to clarify things, let me know in the live stream. I'll be sure to bring that up. You can also leave me an email at rehabpowerhour@motusnova.com. And you can drop me a line at any time. That's open day or night. So if you have any questions or comments when we're not actually live on Rehab Power Hour, you can drop me a line there. You can also give me a call and leave me a voicemail at 404-594-4244. Anytime, day, night, whenever you're thinking about neuro rehab, you have questions about your hand mentor, questions about a paper that you're reading. I don't know if you guys read papers, but I always do, and I always have questions about them. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. And also, if you guys like what we're doing here on the Rehab Power Hour and the support group, feel free to like it and share with any of your friends or family members, or anyone you think would be interested in learning more about stroke recovery and maybe the role of robotics. So feel free to do that, guys. I'm looking forward to joining, growing the community and getting the word out about the importance of neuro rehab. And also, if you'd like to be a guest on a future edition of Rehab Power Hour, feel free to drop me a line on any of those three places, either on the live stream here or email or give me a call. I'd love to have you on. Love to hear your story, your path of recovery. I always learn a lot whenever I work with anyone, and I think everyone else can learn from each other. And so, if you want to come on and share your story, if you have questions about your hand mentor, I'd love to have you on. I also want to remind everyone that one of the main purposes of Rehab Power Hour is to give you guys another sort of guilt-free opportunity to do more rehab. So if you have your hand mentor, foot mentor, feel free to power that on. And the top right-hand side, or actually in a new window that will pop up, you'll see a join live session button. And that will be a shared prescription that we can all engage in together while we do the Rehab Power Hour. If you don't have a hand mentor or foot mentor, no problem. Get your home exercise program out that your occupational and physical therapist gave to you and start doing those exercises. And we will be here to keep you company while you do it. The one thing you got to be sure you're doing is making sure you're staying attentive and being cognizant of doing those exercises. And we'll just keep you company while you do that. Also, as a quick high level, I think we're running down to the last couple of days here for our contest. And so the details are in the actual main page on our Facebook group, or also on the main Facebook group for Motus Nova. But there's a contest now you can enter in for a free month subscription. And the way you enter in is you actually will videotape yourself actually doing a functional task, or you'll videotape yourself using a hand mentor. And you'll be entered into a drawing to win a free month subscription. So it's gonna be really fun. I think, we're coming down to the last couple of days here. I think the last day is March 31st at midnight. So feel free to get your emails, your videos into us before then. And I'm gonna be really excited to look through all those videos and see what you guys are doing and what you're capable of doing, and to see how things are going for you guys. So feel free to email us. I think it's ella.sophia@motusnova.com. Or you can message us on Facebook or on Instagram to get that submission. And just as a reminder, it's last couple of days here. March 31st is the last day of submission. So get those in. Also, I want to congratulate a couple of individuals for hitting the 30-hour challenge mark. So this is a big accomplishment for a couple of these individuals. So I want to congratulate Andrea, Michael, Susan, and Sharon, Susanna, and Ivor for completing the 30-hour challenge. So this is a big benchmark in this first 30 days of getting your hand mentor. You're actually able to get 30 hours of rehab. So it's an hour a day, which is a big target, a big benchmark. So big congratulations to all of you out there for making sure you actually hit that mark. It is a big accomplishment, and we all send you congratulations, and we encourage you to keep going. So I know 30 hours is a big step, but let's keep pushing forward and keep going towards 50 hours, 100 hours of rehab, and we'll continue to see larger and larger improvements. So pretty excited about that, guys. And I'm going to just take a quick second here just to welcome people in our live stream here. See some old, some regulars and some new individuals as well. So Jerry, as always, great to see you. Joe, great to see you from Pennsylvania. Stacy, great to have you back on from Seattle. Don, as always, and Heather, thanks so much for being here, guys. And Stacy Kenworthy, thanks so much for being here. And Jerome, Betty, and Carm, thanks so much for being here, Carm. I think we have, let's see, Mark and Heather's calling from South Carolina. So hopefully you guys are all having a great evening so far. And thanks so much for being here. If you have any questions, let me know in the live stream here. So I guess we have a lot to get to today, and that was quite a long list of announcements, but let's get to some fun things. And let me introduce Dr. Steve Wolf. Dr. Wolf, welcome back to the Rehab Power. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Housley. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess it's now been about 2 weeks since our last session together when you were on the Rehab Power Hour, and we talked about a really cool paper. I'll just give guys you guys some background to this before we dive into some of the new stuff that we have. That last discussion we had was about some of the basic science findings for how repetitive task practice works and how we know we can actually get changes in our brain. This is a series of papers and a long series of studies done by Randy Nudo, and we looked at some of those really cool images that were more of invasive ways of exploring the brain. And Dr. Wolf has graciously offered to bring up some of his data from some of his clinical trials of investigating individuals who have had strokes and to see whether or not we can induce changes in the brain similar to what we see in those basic science studies. And so I am really, really excited to share with you guys today some of that data. And so thanks so much, Dr. Wolf, for bringing, for having some show and tell with us on Rehab Power Hour. So I don't know how you want to start this off, but maybe I got your slides here. We can kind of go through some of them. But maybe would you mind giving us some context and some background for this study that we're going to talk about?
Well, it's actually a series of studies, and just put this into perspective for those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, and we looked at a paper in which one could actually truly map locations in the brains of monkeys who had been given a stroke, forced a stroke upon them. And in those cases, you can actually take an electrode and put it in specific locations of the brain, stimulate very precisely, and then look and see if there are muscles, in this case of the arm and hand, that are excited when that stimulation occurs. And if those representations change, especially in the area where the stroke has occurred, and they get bigger and they're associated with functional improvement, that's a very clear indication of the expansion, which some people might refer to as a term I think most of you have heard by now, plasticity, and its relationship to the all-important question, well, if the brain is changing, what can I do that I couldn't do before? How are the two related? Well, those were very incredibly detailed and meticulous studies that were done in animal models. And what I'm going to do now is to try to give you a little bit of a human counterpart to those studies that are done so exquisitely in monkeys. And to do that, let me set the stage in these figures that follow. We've spoken several times, and many of you heard about this concept called constraint-induced movement therapy, in which fundamentally the patient, is asked, if not forced, to use your weaker arm by immobilizing your better arm for varying amounts of time throughout the day and over the course of several days or weeks. And then before and after the training, during that constraint, we look at changes that go on in your brain and the changes that occur in your functional capability. So we want to talk about some evidence of what's going on in your brain and trying to make this as simple as I possibly can and show you what some of these changes might look like. The pictures I'm about to show you have been replaced to some extent today by far more complicated things that we can do with some of the machinery that allows us to look at pictures of actual pictures of your brain to guide us as to where we're going to. Do I have control of the pointer?
So I can actually point, Steve. Yeah, I think on my
Okay.
end here. Yeah. So let me know where you want me to point to, and I can kind of.
So I'm looking at the. I'm going to look at that cap that that person's wearing, and that funny-looking figure 8 device over it. So that cap, and we'll see a close-up in the next slide. Not quite yet. Is actually positioned in real exact locations on the head that are correlate with certain parts of our head, like the point of our head, right on the tippy top, as one location where we put one of the markers on that cap. And everything is arranged so that the X's and Y's, so the crisscrosses you're going to see in a moment, are always aligned in the exact same location. So you might imagine.
Steve, can I? Yeah, if I wouldn't mind here, I think one of the things that might be helpful is we got to remember that our brain has some structure to it in terms of it's not just a random series of neurons that are amalgamated together. There is a map that we can reliably use to kind of anchor where this tool is being applied.
And I'm going to show that in a moment in one of the upcoming slides.
Sure.
It's not just, well, let's take this funny looking figure 8 thing here and put it somewhere and do something and see what happens. It's far more systematic than that. So I include this picture in the bottom part that you see here. Those are images of the brain. And while you're going to be seeing a picture of a cap in this figure 8 thing, which is actually a stimulating probe, and we'll talk about that in a moment, we now can actually take an image of someone's brain and then use a series of landmarks to identify on that image where precisely the stimulation should go. So by today's standards, we don't even need that cap anymore. But this is how we started. And I want you to get a feel for what we attempted to do. So let's take a close-up of this picture, and you see it right here. And you can see on the left, you can see just to orient you, the head and the neck is to the front. Your back of your head is to your left side. Front to the right side in that picture. And you see a bunch of what look like dots, right? Well, those dots are specifically positioned to very the precise anatomical landmarks on your skull, which correspond to the location where they sit compared to areas of your brain which lie directly below that. Our goal, and we know this now because we can actually look at images, and before we had images to do the stimulation on, we had a pretty good idea of where to put the stimulating probe you see on the right here in order to get a response in some muscles of the upper extremity, because that's what we're keying on here. So let's talk about that funny looking figure 8 coil you see on the right. And what's being passed through that coil at its base are fundamentally electrical pulses. And those pulses can travel in 2 different directions, fundamentally around the outside of each of those 2 circles. Now, what's underneath that hard plastic in the picture, in those circles, are copper coils. And when you pass electricity through these coils, and they meet kind of in the middle, midpoint between where those 2 holes are, that's where the current coming in opposite directions creates, through those coils, creates a magnetic field. And what goes through your skull is not an electrical pulse. It's actually a magnetic wave that once it crosses your skull, it can penetrate your skull and go through it a few millimeters. And that pulse excites nerve cells below your skull. And when those nerve cells get excited, they discharge. And if they're over the area of your brain, which you call the motor cortex, that's the area where the output signals come to go to your muscles, they will cause those cells to discharge. And if they go downstream through your brain stem, and they cross over to the opposite side, they're destined to go to the spinal cord and out the spinal cord at a specific level that results in stimulating or activating muscles. And we can see those
Dr.
muscles.
Wolf, if we were to, so like on me, just hypothetically, if we were to stimulate my left side of my motor cortex, which is kind of the front part of my cortex, in the right way, we would actually see a movement in my left or my right upper extremity.
If it was strong enough, and I'm going to show a picture of what that looks like in just a moment.
Okay.
I want people to understand that if you're following what I'm saying, we can actually kind of create a map this way.
Mm-hmm.
We know if you consider going lengthwise across your head from the nose.
It's like making a map, right?
Exactly.
it's like the beautiful
exactly what I'm showing you.
It's like kind of creating
Consider that the y-axis. Consider that the y-axis of a map, and going across from ear to ear, the x-axis, right? So we basically have a grid, and every one of those little points that you see there on that cap has an x and a y value, just like you had in high school trigonometry and geometry. You had to learn these locations, the plot graphs, and all those other crazy things we did, an x and a y number. And we can then do the stimulation over each of those little dots that we think is associated with the activation of nerve cells in the motor cortex that are destined to go to muscles that we are interested in. I'll explain what those muscles are in just a moment. And what we'd like to then to know that how little do we have to turn up the juice in order to see a response that we can repeat reliably with the least amount of current that's necessary. And that's what we're looking for. So we plot all of these little points, point by point, and this is kind of what we see. If you look at this figure, what we're looking at, imagine, because this is exactly what we did. I know what all of our patients want to be able to do is to raise their wrist up like you're waving goodbye and open your hand. I think a lot of us have difficulty doing that once we've had a stroke. And that's precisely some of the things you're trying to train when you're on the hand mentor. This is the physiology representation of that. Do you remember I told you we put these pulses through that figure of 8 coil? And when we stimulate, what we see by putting sensors over a specific muscle, and what our interest has always been, are the muscles that raise your wrist up. The same muscles you're trying to activate on a hand mentor. But instead of a exoskeleton that moves your wrist, we actually have sensors or electrodes that pick up the muscle activity. And we're asking the question, when we probe around these different spots, can we elicit a response or can't we? And if we can, in how many different places?
Yep.
What we see
so you're basically
here,
on like for here, like you're basically just going around and mapping individual spaces in the cortex.
Each one of those points.
Yep.
And
whether or not you're going to
ask,
elicit a response.
Do we see a response reliably or don't we? This is what a response would look like. That blue line you see to the far left is the actual initiation of when the pulse is delivered through the probe, across the skull, and onto the brain. By the way, this it sounds like it's terrible. No pain at all. It feels like someone's kind of tapping on your skull very lightly.
Yep.
That's the extent of the discomfort. And then you look, and we see this, what we've now colored in red, this funny looking line, this wiggly line. This is an MEP. This we call a muscle or motor evoked potential. That is the response that's happening, in our case, in the muscles that raise the wrist up. And this time from that stimulation there to where you see that response is in the order of 20 to 25 milliseconds. Those are thousandths of a second, not seconds, thousandths of a second. The time it takes for those nerve cells, from the time they're activated in your brain, to go down your motor cortex and down your brainstem, cross over to the other side, down to your spinal cord, out the spinal cord, to the muscles that we're interested in.
And just for a sense of context, guys, I think it's helpful to know the time it takes to blink an eye is about 4 times the time it takes a signal from your brain to get down to your muscle to evoke that. 4 times. So whenever you have to blink your eyes, divide that by 4, that's how quickly it's going to get down to your muscle and evoke a potential.
So if you can help me here with a pointer.
Sure.
Unless you're controlling it. When you look at that funny red line, you look at the top peak right in the middle of the thought where the M and E are, and the lowest peak, which is slightly thereafter, that's what we call the amplitude or the size of the response. That's important because we want to know two things. When we stimulate at any one point, do we see a response or we don't we? And if we see it, for the least amount of stimulation we have to provide, where do we see the largest response? So all of that gets mapped. And that's now what I'm going to show you, because the question now is, all right, if we're going to do something like constraint-induced movement therapy, if a person can now move their wrists and fingers more, do tasks that they couldn't do before, where does that happen? What's going on here? And this picture here represents exactly the point we're trying to make. And perhaps Dr. Halsey, what we can do is blow this up a little bit so they can see the maps a little more. Can we do that or not?
Of course.
Thank you. And let's just go down to the baseline. Okay, so if you can imagine now, remember the grid we saw on the red cap on someone's head?
All those little points.
Imagine, imagine that's the grid that we were looking at. Now, what I pointed out here is what we call the affected side and the unaffected or least affected side. The affected side is that side of the brain that had to be stimulated in order to evoke a response from a person. So if this is the left, imagine the person's nose being in the front of this grid. That would make this affected side their left side, wouldn't it? Okay, and what we want to do is look at the response that's occurring in their right hand. Now you see those crazy, funny looking figures? Well, those aren't just funny figures. That's the map. And the way we have arranged this is every one of those grid points that you see there, when we stimulated, we saw a response. And you remember I told you, we're not just looking, we're looking for the smallest response, and we're looking for the largest response we can see with the smallest amount of current. So you see different colors there. So what you see in the total picture, what you see in the total picture are all the sites that got responses. The redder the site, the higher the response we saw. Okay, and of course we need to do this from both sides of the brain, right?
Yep.
Because we have to ask the question, are there differences? If so, how big are those differences? If we're going to now do an intervention, try to do something to improve the use of the impaired upper extremity, where are we going to see those changes? Will we see any changes? Will it be related to any functional changes? Those are the important questions. So now, in this particular example, you see what we see on the first, this is the baseline before we've done any interventions at all. And while it's not that apparent, the size for the unaffected, the amount of territory for the unaffected side, that's the one on the right, the baseline, is a little bit larger than the left. But here's what's most important. This person now went through 2 weeks of constraint-induced movement therapy. During which
Dr. Wolf, could you tell us a little bit about that, though? So what exactly were they doing during that intervention?
Yeah, I will. I'll do that in just a moment.
Sure.
And just during that time, for all of their waking hours, except for having to go to the bathroom and certain hygiene-based activities, the better hand and arm were immobilized. And the way we immobilized the hand and arm is our participants wore a mitt or a big mitt on their better arm. And that mitt would not allow you to grasp or use it for anything. But we didn't put the arm in a sling because, you know what? What if something terrible happened, like you lost your balance? You still wanted to have the ability to move your entire better arm to protect yourself in case you fell or had to lean against a wall or something. But what you can't do here is you can't use your wrist or your hand at all. Just can't do it. So all of the training during that period of time was devoted to the weaker arm, the paretic arm, we say. And that involved, the way we did this study, coming to the clinic for 2 weeks, 5 days a week, all day, to do practice of doing tasks that are important to you over and over, or doing it in such a way that we did it in little gradations or steps, where you didn't do the whole task right away. You did elements that move you closer and closer to completing the task. So for
this is often called like task decomposition, right? Where you take the individual
task. We call it task adaptive practice.
Okay, gotcha.
ATP, adaptive task practice. And what this means is, if you're having difficulty getting your hand around a cup to position to drink, you don't go for the whole ball of wax right away.
Yep.
You break it down into its pieces. First, can you reach your arm out towards the cup? And if you can do it fairly easily, what if you move the cup further away? Can you increase your elbow movements without moving your whole body forward to get to it? Then, can you open your hand? If you open it a little bit, can you get it around the small object? Can we then increase that so you get it around a larger object, which you have to separate your finger, your thumb, from your index finger further? Then, can you pick up the cup empty? Can you pick it up with a little fluid in other words, increase the weight of the cup? Can you control it as you bring it towards your mouth? Can you drink from it? If not, can we use a straw so you don't have to move it as far? Then can we progressively cut down that straw so you have to bring it closer and closer? Can we fill up the cup a little bit more so that you are now in charge of not just drinking from it, but making sure you don't spill any fluid from it? And these are progressive steps of what we call adaptive task practice for those people who can't do that task so cleanly and so clearly right away.
This is very much like the concept that we talked about 2 weeks ago about making sure that it's not just repetitions. It's not just doing movements. They have to be hard enough. They have to be sufficiently challenging to induce a change. So that's part of this concept, is making it progressive, right? Is advancing the complexity and the challenge. And that's one of the things that's so important with neuro rehab, is constantly driving towards something that is going to be a bit harder and harder.
So this is what we see after 2 weeks of constraint therapy. And if you're with me, you probably can tell me what you're looking at. Now compare the affected side, brain representation for those muscles which raise the wrist and fingers up. On the affected side, 2 weeks after the constraint therapy versus the baseline or before constraint therapy. I think we would agree that the cortical representation, the size has gotten much larger, and the height or of those. Remember, more red is larger signals, has gotten more expansive also. And if you look at the unaffected side, that's the one on the right, it looks a little smaller. And that's not surprising. Why? Because the patient,
they were constrained.
Not that better arm as much.
Yep.
Right? During constraint, it gets smaller.
Yep.
And, okay, so that was a 2-week intervention. Then another important question is, were there changes in function that occurred during that time? That's a whole other topic. You'll have to believe me now when I say that indeed there were.
Well, I think, Dr. Wolf, that could be a topic for another Rehab Power Hour.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And then another important question. Okay, we did this for 2 weeks. How long does it last?
Yep.
How do I know that just because you've done this, it'll be over today after I take this mid off? Well, we brought people back 4 months later. And look at what you see here. The size of let's just look at the unaffected side. That's the picture on the far right. That map now looks a bit more like the original map. And look what's happened to the affected side. It looks like it's even a little bit larger. The important point is it didn't get smaller, which suggests that the person's using the muscles that are involved in raising the wrist and fingers up more. How do we know we've done that? Well, the only proof we have, we can't take pictures of someone all the time throughout the day and see all of what they're doing for 4 months. We couldn't afford, and I don't think there are any reliable sensors that enable us to clearly understand what someone was doing with some kind of sensor on your arm. That technology is changing dramatically, by the way. But what we can do is ask, what can you do at 4 months that you couldn't do it, be it baseline or 2 weeks later? And the quality and speed of task performance still continues to improve. In fact, I can tell you, unfortunately, we only have maps for 4 months out. We don't have maps for 1 year out, but we do have data of functionality 1 year after a 2-week intervention, and those improvements are retained. It's a very powerful form of therapy, one of our more successful ones. So this is
great, Dr. Wolf. Thank you. Yeah.
If you look at this picture collectively, and I'll stop here because I know you've got lots of other things to do. If someone says plasticity, function, this is an effort to try to tie the two concepts together for you. I think you'll see that this is a representation, a map of your brain that's responsible for opening your hand and your wrist. And as we can see, that got larger. It means more use of neurons in that area as a result of this particular intervention. So there's a link between hopefully function and what we call plasticity measured through some mapping procedure. I can stop there if you wish.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Wolf. I appreciate that. And it's wonderful to go through and actually see the evidence, right? We all talk about these concepts, but it's good to kind of open up the scientific textbook and I guess in this case the scientific paper and go look at what actually is there. And so
for those of you who let me just finish. For those of you who remember 2 weeks ago and saw the maps of the monkey brain in which we put fine electrodes inside the brain and do stimulation, this is our counterpart to doing that kind of thing without opening up someone's brain and trying.
I was just about to get to that. Yeah, this is what's called non-invasive brain stimulation for the purposes of mapping, and I think this is great. I think there's a couple of good questions here that we might get to at some point. Some of them about the types of participants who were involved in the study, and maybe we can get into that a little bit later.
Sure, I'll stick around.
Yeah, but I think just to quickly summarize this, so just for those of you guys at a high level, it looks like this is the human analog to those data that we talked about 2 weeks ago. And what we're doing here is we're using a tool that can stimulate the brain in a non-invasive way through magnetic fields. And you can use this to map where various neurons are going and controlling the muscles. And we can see the high level takeaways here, I think, are that we can see a effect of 2 weeks of constraint therapy. And one of the most important things is that those effects are persistent. I think that is at least out to 4 months. Those effects are persistent, and I think maybe next week or a week after that, we could talk about, do those effects translate to clinically meaningful improvements in function? I think that's of course a very, very important aspect. I think some of those questions, Dr. Wolf, here about are they individuals with less or more disability? I think this is one of the challenges with doing clinical trials and interpreting the data, that we have to be careful about who are the candidates that we're talking about. That's a very, very important question. So I want to get back to that, Dawn. So Dawn and Stacy have these questions posted in our live stream here, and I'll be sure to get to those questions a little bit later. I think at a high level, a lot of these individual trials had very, let's say, strict inclusion criteria. So I think it is important to talk about who would be good candidates for this sort of intervention. So very good, guys. So thanks so much, Dr. Wolf. I appreciate it. I always like looking at data. One of my guilty pleasures, being a scientist and all. So, yeah, very good. So I think what we're going to do, guys, I'm going to just quickly reintroduce everyone. We're about halfway through our session tonight. And so this is your Rehab Power Hour. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Housley. Thanks so much for being here with me on this Monday evening. We have a couple additional guests I want to get to today. We have a couple of spotlight users, but quick reminder, if you have any questions or comments for me, post them in the live stream here, or email me at rehabpowerhour@motusnova.com. You can also give me a call at 404-594-4244. Leave me a voicemail, and I'll be sure to answer your questions. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate everyone being here. We have some great questions and great discussion coming in on the live stream here. I'll be sure to try to get to that. But first, I'm actually going to go over to our first spotlight user. I believe we have Ramit with me today. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Very good. So as always, would you guys mind maybe start off by introducing who you are, where you're calling from, and when you had your neurologic injury?
Sure. Yes. So my name is Peristu, and I'm Ramat's daughter. My dad had a stroke back in March of 2015, and from Bethesda, Maryland. And he has been very active trying different interventions, different games and devices. And when we heard about this technology, we're quite keen to give it a try.
Well, very good. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about your path at this point. So you guys have been pretty engaged with Rehab. What kind of things have you done so far?
Yes, he has been involved in some clinical trials. Actually, TMS was one of the candidates that he wasn't qualified for since he had a seizure. They were a little bit reluctant to try that on him. He has been doing a lot of game-based sort of activities, from Flint Rehab, Sabo products, different of those. At the beginning of the stroke, he didn't have any movement at all in his left hand. But after, I would say, about 3 or 4 years, he's gaining some movement in his arm, but not much of functionality in the hand and fingers and grasp. I mean, he can squeeze and grasp things, but he cannot open up, not at all.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, if you have any more specific questions, I can.
Yeah. No, it's always good to get kind of high level where you guys are coming from, kind of know your story a little bit. So you guys are clearly using the hand mentor. We can kind of see that. Raman, you have it on. So I'm going to ask you, how long have you guys been using it?
We got the device on March 18th.
Okay.
So less than 2 weeks this Thursday.
Okay.
It's going to be 2 weeks.
Okay.
And what I have noticed, especially right after, he's been trying to do an hour a day.
Very good.
So far he's done over 14 hours, which is quite good. Yeah. And what I noticed for him using the device is definitely less tone after he uses the device, especially in the hand and fingers.
Was that a big problem for you guys, the tone in the hand?
It's more in the arm, but yeah, okay. Sometimes the hand also, especially in a cold winter time, it gets pretty
sure.
as well.
Sure. Okay. So you guys have noticed some changes in tone. I know you guys are maybe only about 10 days, 2 weeks in. Any other changes you guys have noticed? Anything you're liking about the games? Talk to me about the early process.
So I think part of the challenge that we have, and I think I pointed out last week, is for him, he's not quite engaged in the game. Maybe it's because he doesn't have much of a movement yet. So he gets easily bored. And like I listened to your recommendation of kind of, splitting the sessions and, keep him engaged and not any sources of distraction around him. But I think he's just not quite aware, or maybe he's not understanding of what exactly needs to be done in the games, or how can he do it himself. I guess part of the reason he in some of the other games that he has used, he has been able to do a lot of, I call it, cheating and using a passive movement. So he was more engaged in terms of getting the right hands, helping, and just score the games, which I always reminded him that's not the purpose. But in here it's he can't do any of that. So that's a little bit of a challenge for him. Yeah.
That's such a great comment, Paris, too. So I want to commend you for I mean, it's always good to have someone to call you out a little bit, right? We got to have someone there to always keep us honest. And so I think that's super important to remember, guys, that we have to do this. It has to be our own volitional activities, right? You can't use your less affected limb to help you. That's really only cheating you. So we really need you to do the movements. The hand mentors there to kind of help and provide as much help as you may need, but it's not there to provide more than you need. And you can't, of course, you can't phone a friend. Basically, there's no phoning a friend. So maybe what we can do today is, I think one of the things to make sure that is to make sure all the settings are correct. So we can actually go through and do a quick assessment to see exactly what the range of motions are like. And then we can also make sure that some of the games are appropriate. And I'm also able on my end to make adjustments on the games. So what we can do, guys, is I've actually been watching some of the data come in. I've kind of been ingesting a little bit of what's going on, and we can then make some fine-tuning adjustments. But it looks like you guys are actually playing fishing right now. Yes. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, very good. So one thing I'm going to ask is maybe could you guys hit on the top left-hand side? Actually, you can hit the pause button. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do is we'll actually go back and do a quick assessment. So on the top left-hand side, you'll see the little home button. Go ahead and press that little house for me. And then while we do this, I'll quickly walk through maybe ask you guys some questions about the games. Were there certain games that were maybe more challenging, or are there certain games that were more fun, more understandable, or were they kind of all the same?
Are there any specific games that you like more? I think there was one that, I mean, he usually plays that with his caregiver since I'm doing my job during the day.
Sure.
But I think the one that he was picking up a ball and putting it in some kind of a container. I was just watching it. I think you like that. Are there any specific games that you like more than the others?
Okay. Well, we can. I can see your screen right now, so you can go ahead and hit back, and then let's go to telehealth, and then we can go through it, and maybe this will give us some clarity. So go to assessment for me. So what we'll do is we'll do the kind of standard 3-step process here. And so what I'd like you guys to do, I like to set up. I want to make sure that you guys are actually able to move down into flexion. That's one of the keys. So are you guys able to actually go all the way down, or are you resting on a pillow and it's kind of blocking us? Because we need to be able to go down into flexion and up into extension. Okay, so I do see that we are kind of getting some blockage there. If you can see that left-hand side, that left angle is actually kind of hitting the table. If you can see that.
This guy?
So the furthest part away by the pinky. That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So if that's going to also kind of rob us a little bit, right? So if we have some elevation, but we're blocking ourselves on a table or a hard surface, that will really restrict how much movement we have. So you might want to kind of prop it up with maybe another pillow or a rolled up towel. That can work for now, but that's a good. Okay. Got
it.
Okay, that should work right there, provided we can actually kind of balance it. Okay, I'm just going to get an idea what kind of ranges of motion we're operating in here. Okay, so what I'd like you guys to do is go ahead and try to move up into extension as far as you can for me. As far as you can. Yeah, very good. I like you using both hands. Very good. I'm going to have you move down into flexion for me as far as you can. Down towards the ground as far as you can. Down.
Go down. Now go down.
Very good. Got some movement up, and you guys are watching me on my side with that data come through, and have you go down. Then we'll have you go up again for me one more time. Up.
Up. Just your hands.
Very good. And no cheating. Very good. And then back down into flexion from as far down as you can. Okay. And then I'll have you relax. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Got some movement there. I'm going to then kick in here with a little bit of assistance. And so you guys may hear the hand mentor kick in. And so what I'd like you to do is go ahead and close your eyes. And I want you to tell me as soon as you feel the hand mentor move you for the very first time. So don't cheat. Don't use your hearing. Just let me know when you start to feel it move.
Let him know when you feel it move. Okay.
And so the reason, guys, why I'm doing this is to check how Ramit's sensation is. This is a important aspect of recovery, and just to give me an idea about how good our discrimination is. So it's not just motoric functions that are important, but it's also important about our sensation.
Do you feel anything? Do you feel
it's moving?
It's not.
Okay, might get a little bit there.
We tell him when it's moving.
Okay, very good, very good. That's when the hand mentor started to move. You guys could see it on my end. And so next, I want you to tell me, we start to feel kind of a stretch in our flexors or your hand, okay? So none of this should be uncomfortable, just whether or not we have a little bit of a stretch. Okay. And actually, I think you guys had a question about the TMS. Is that correct?
Yes, I was actually wondering if my understanding from what was presented was that first the participants of the study were under TMS treatment, and then they were doing the constraint-based therapy. I was wondering if there is some data, without doing a TMS, what's the impact of, just doing that therapy without the excitation of the brain?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I think this is a good point of clarification. And with respect to the TMS, this was really used as a mapping tool. It wasn't used as an interventional tool. There are, of course, studies that actually do combination therapies where they'll either do TMS or they'll do what's called TCDS, which is a different type of stimulation. And that's used to actually kind of excite things exogenously. But the study that Dr. Wolf was talking about, it was really a measurement, a tool, a very, very complicated measurement tool nonetheless, but it was a way to measure changes in the brain. And so it was, I imagine if there's an exclusion criteria for maybe a confounding neurologic injury like a seizure, then you would not want to externally modify the excitability of your cortex, which could potentially cause a seizure to emerge. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's an exclusion criteria. Dr. Wolf, any thoughts on that?
I'm not quite sure I follow the entire intent of the question. If the question is TMS alone a sufficient vehicle for inducing plasticity or movement as opposed to constraint therapy, or can the two be included together as a treatment tool, not as, where TMS is a treatment tool, not an evaluative tool? If the intent is to use TMS just to stimulate and make the muscles move without the patient doing anything voluntarily, it's not going to have much of an impact at all. There are different ways in which TMS can be used to either inhibit certain parts of the brain or to excite certain parts of the brain that can be done immediately prior to, or in conjunction with something like constraint therapy or repetitive task practice. That gets a little complicated because the way one wishes to do that is based upon, to some extent, where the lesion is, where the problem is in the brain, and other behavioral aspects of what a patient can and cannot do. I just think it's important to keep in mind that TMS has multiple applications to it. But the bottom line to be learned from this discussion is that if we're trying to induce what we called earlier plasticity, make these changes occur and make them last, it is absolutely fundamentally essential that the patient is a proactive partner in doing this. The actual drive of the plasticity and the change is the problem-solving aspect of what the patient does in trying to reacquire a functionally relevant task. That's what seems to be a primary stimulus.
This is why we hound on this so much, guys. It's not simply just the hours of movement, the repetitions. You have to be, as Dr. Wolf says, you have to be an active participant in those tasks. Super important. So Parasu, let's go ahead and have you guys, I have a little bit of assistance in the hand mentor now. What I'm having you guys do is actually go through this process again. I'm going to have you guys flex down for me as much as you can.
Flex down.
So flex down as far as you can. Very good. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Very good. And then relax and try to come up and do extension as far as you can. Very good.
Bring up.
Very good. See how far you can go up. Keep going up, keep going up, keep going up.
0.
There we go. Good. Very good. So what I'm going to have you guys do is I figured out how kind of, we actually gained a little bit of motion compared to where you were at baseline. So I'm going to actually make a couple modifications to the range of motion. Okay. And then what I'd like you guys to do is to go on your side, hit the back button, and then let's go through a couple of these actual activities and see if we get some, I guess, better responses in the actual therapeutic activities in the games. Okay? So you can go ahead and hit home for me. And then let's go ahead and hit begin therapy. And I'm going to go ahead and make one more modification there. So the biggest thing I actually did, guys, was you were at about 30 degrees of extension. I moved this up to about 36 degrees because you can actually move up to around 40 degrees. I don't want to cap us out all the way at 40 degrees. I think that might be a bit much. And so what we're going to do is kind of meet us in the middle, about 36 degrees, 35 degrees. And that'll be a good starting place, okay? So let's go ahead and have you hit play. Yeah, we can go ahead and hit play. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to have you guys go through a couple of these repetitions. And I think this is super important. You cannot, as Dr. Wolf said, you cannot just let the hand mentor do it for you. I love this. You're using both hands, this bimanual task, super great to do. So really follow that strongman. You see those arrows on the left-hand side? Those arrows are indicating where you need to move to. And of course, the actual strongman itself, that avatar is you. So you are, your movements are directly related to that guy. And so when you have to move down, so does the strongman. So very good. Keep going down, almost all the way there, almost all the way there. You guys can get a sense of completion too by looking at that blue bar on the right-hand side. So that blue bar will kind of give us some indication. So you see as that kind of completes, it's a multi-step process. So the strongman activity has 2 steps, a down phase and an up phase. And each of them is going to be completed in with that blue bar. So that's really good. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is actually go through a couple of these actual repetitions here. And I'm going to go over and answer a couple of questions, I think. Okay. But I'm going to come back to you guys in just a moment. I think I'm going to go over to Brian really quickly and ask Brian how things are going. Brian, can you hear me? Hopefully we'll try to get Brian's audio coming through here. And if we can't get Brian's audio, oh, there, I think I see Brian's video. Brian, how are you?
Good. Yeah, I think I was muted.
That's quite all right, Brian. How are things going for you?
Well, they're going slowly. I've had it for about 3 weeks, but you know,
Okay.
and I've tried to use it several times, and I have also gotten some help from was Carmen, I think, at Motus Nova to try to you know, recalibrate it, because I felt
Sure.
like I had very little movement in my left hand. So when I was
Okay.
playing games, it was tough to
Okay.
do it.
Okay. Well, maybe one thing we can do, Brian, if you have your hand mentor on, what we can actually go through is a quick assessment process and make sure
Sure.
that those adjustments have been taken. So
Yeah,
on your
that's great.
side, okay, on your side, do you have your hand mentor powered on?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have you go ahead and hit the telehealth button for me. And I'm going to
Okay.
have you start that meeting for me.
All right. Let me get there.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do you see on your side, Brian?
I got the menu, home, reports,
Okay.
settings, account, telehealth.
Telehealth for me, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Start meeting.
Yes, please. Very good.
Okay. All right.
Already ahead of me.
Okay.
Excellent. So when you hit start meeting, there will be a little window that will pop up in that top left-hand side.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. Go ahead and press that icon, that little gray icon in that window for me. And then you should see there should be a blue button in the center. And that blue button will say something to the effect of toggle to share screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing a gray icon in the middle. Is that the one I should push?
So press that gray icon for me. And then on the bottom of that, you should see a couple of buttons. They might be blue in color.
Yeah, blue and
Okay.
two blue,
I think,
gray.
yep. The one button in the middle, it should say something to the effect of toggle to share screen.
Yeah, that's it. I got that one. Okay.
Please press that for me.
All right, just did.
Okay, very good. And then what will happen then is I want you to go ahead and press, let's make sure we get that video coming through there. If it doesn't come through, that's okay. We might have a little bit of connection issue. What do you see on your end? Maybe try to press it one more time for me.
Let me try it again. Yeah,
Okay.
I tried that icon in the middle again. It looks sort of like a person.
Yeah, a little bit of a person. Yep. Kind of some shoulders and a little head there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But didn't seem to do anything. You want me to push
That's okay.
toggle?
One more
Toggle
time on the
sharing.
toggle, please. Please.
Okay, there we go. Huh.
Okay. And if that isn't responsive, that's okay. I don't necessarily need to see your screen. All I need to see is really the data, to be honest. It's just always good to kind of share what I'm looking at on my end. So what we can do, Brian, is go ahead and hit the right-hand side over by the assessment screen. There'll be a little bit of a bit of screen over there. Go ahead and press that.
Yeah.
And then once that gray screen goes away, press the assessment button for me.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, very good. So
All
on the left-hand side, what do you see on your
Live
console? Yeah, what is that number?
Minus 13.73.
Beautiful. We are on the same page. Okay. Let me go ahead and just get a quick sense of the landscape here, Brian. Look through the data. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and go up and do extension for me as far as you can.
Oh, up?
And please, yep. I might switch things around every now and then. That's okay. And remember, no cheating. Just do the best you can. I will say there's no right or wrong answer to this. Just do as best you can. Okay.
Can't really do it at all.
That's okay. And I'm going to have you switch around and I'm going to have you go down into flexion for me as far as you can.
Okay.
Okay. Very good.
I don't think it's moving.
Yeah, you moved a little bit. So you can see that live angle. You actually went down to 22 degrees. You started at 13.
Right.
Okay. Very good. And then so go ahead and relax for me.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick in over here and I'm going to do the same sort of thing I did with Ramit here. is go ahead and close your eyes for me. Let me know when you start to feel the hand mentor move you for the very first time. Don't rely on the sound, because that's cheating. I just want to see what you can sense.
All right.
Okay. Very good. And we can all hear the hand mentor kick in there, and that's okay.
Yeah, hear it. It's kind of hard to avoid that.
It is hard to avoid. I know. I'm relying on a little bit of honesty here. That's okay.
Yeah.
Let me know when you can feel that thing move.
Okay.
Okie dokie. We'll keep going up. Very good.
Yeah. I feel it move a little bit. I don't know.
Very good. Very good.
But
no, you're moving a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, I can feel something.
You can open up. Yeah, you can open up your eyes again. The last little bit here we'll do is kind of a quick tone check and range of motion check here. So go ahead and let me know when you start to feel the hand mentor stretchy just a little bit, okay?
Okay.
It shouldn't be uncomfortable. Just let me know when you feel any sort of stretch. We'll keep moving up here.
Feel a little bit of a stretch, maybe.
Okay. What part of your arm do you feel that stretch? Is it in your fingers, in your wrist, in your arm?
In the fingers, I think.
In the fingers, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it uncomfortable?
No.
Okay. That's quite all right. All right. Almost there. Last little bit. You still doing okay?
Yeah, doing good.
Very good. Very good. 2 more steps here. Any discomfort on your end?
No.
Okay. Go last little bit. I'm actually fairly happy with this. I see a little bit of a plateau there, but that was just kind of me, I think, slowing down. That's okay. So that's full assistance on the hand mentor. I'm going to drop out the assistance and you just relax and let's see how far down we can go. And so while the hand mentor is going down, I want you to go ahead and move down with it into flexion. Go down as far as you can for me.
Okay.
Keep going down. Keep going down. Keep going down. Very good, and relax. So I'm really glad that you're really being effortful. I'm going to make sure that you're breathing and not holding your breath while you're doing that, though. Okay.
All right. Sure.
No one's passing out on me while we're doing this. Okay.
No.
I have a good record so far, and I don't want to tarnish it today. Great. All right. Very good. So happy with this. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of adjustments here. Look through our assistance values here, where we were in range of motion. Fairly happy here. So I'm going to put a little bit of assistance in this. And as the hand mentor is coming up, I want you to really try to move up into extension for me. Move up as far as you can, Brian.
All right.
Keep going, far as you can, far as you can. Very good, very good. Fairly happy with that. Almost up to 20 degrees. Very, very good. And relax for me. Go a little bit more. We'll go up to 80 here. Let's see if we get a little bit more movement. Okay. Fairly happy with that. Okay. So remind me, what was one of the main issues going forward with the games, Brian? Was it yeah, go ahead.
Mainly that I could do very little as far as the movement goes. I could move some down a bit.
Okay.
But not up.
Sure. I think honestly, it's good to know that is the most common type of impairment, right? Flexion is the far more common movement direction that comes back first. Those muscles tend to be stronger, and our extensors that actually open up our fingers from a closed position, open up and extend our wrist. Those muscles and those movements are the ones that come back the latest. And so I think many people here, if not everyone here, who's had a neurologic injury, a stroke, will be in the same boat. So I imagine, maybe guys, if you're in the live stream, let me know if you have that same sort of pattern where extension is much harder than flexion. Just to kind of let Brian know that he's not alone. That's the most common impairment. So I'm actually fairly happy with these numbers, Brian. I'm gonna make a couple of adjustments though, to make it more appropriate for you. I'm fairly happy with our flexion values here. Make them a little bit, tighten them a little bit and bring them more towards what you're capable of. And what I'm gonna have you do is I'm gonna have you go on the top left-hand side, hit the back button for me.
Okay.
And then go to home. And then we're actually gonna go through a couple of those individual games. So talking about preferences. Do you like the games? Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? We can always modify those.
Yeah, I thought they were okay. I liked the one that was kind of like Pong.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
The first
We
video
call that cosmic tennis, Brian. But yes, there's some similarities, we'll say.
Yeah. And for some reason I like the solitaire game, although
Yeah,
I'm not really sure why.
yeah.
And the strongman one was good too. That was kind of fun.
Okay, all right, all right. Well, I think we have a reasonable prescription here for you. There's a couple of new ones. I think when we start to get some of that extension coming back, we can add in a couple more games. So what we'll have to do is I'll have you back on the Rehab Power Hour when we start to get some of that back, and we can add in some more games. But I'm going to have you actually hit begin therapy for me, and we'll go through and actually see how these improvements, these modifications to your range of motion are doing. Okay.
All right, great.
Okay. So let's have you do that. I'm actually going to quickly go back over to Ramit. Are you guys there?
Yes, we're here.
Excellent. So I've been kind of watching the background here. How are things going?
So I think the first game was good. Now for this game, for example, I'm not sure. Like he doesn't see any errors, so he's not very sure on like what he should be doing. And there was a game before that, the sort of a thermometer or whatever it was.
Sure.
He also wasn't like, I didn't see any errors in there too. So I think.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think some of these games have much more of an implicit style of learning. So maybe I could take this opportunity quickly to kind of walk you through this. So you guys are controlling the paddle on the right. So you guys are the blue team, and the red team is the computer. That's your opponent. Okay. And so whenever the main goal here is to try to make sure that cosmic tennis, that ball does not pass your paddle, because you guys can probably tell that's when the other team scores. And so you have to move up and down. Your movements map directly on. So whenever a rabbit moves up, the paddle's going to move up. And he's going to try to move that to try to intersect the ball and bounce it back towards the opponent. Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys are the ones on the right. And I will say this, and I apologize, it's maybe a little bit confusing, but we try to have it be a little bit of an implicit learning style. Now, with respect to the thermometer, this one I've also had some comments about it being a bit complex, and so let me take this opportunity to kind of help talk you through that one as well. The idea behind this was to think of tone. We want to kind of cool the tone off and kind of cool it down, bring it into control. And so the idea there is to reduce the temperature, to kind of reduce the excitability. So the idea there is to bring the temperature down as much as you can. I guess the challenge and sometimes the confusion happens when we think about the temperature and your movements get kind of an opposite. So when the thermometer goes down, you're moving up. So the idea here is oftentimes our tone is in our flexors, so in the bottom part here in our hand, to keep our hand tight and closed like this. We want to reduce that. And the way we do that with the hand mentor is we move you up into extension. So that's why when you move up into extension, you open your fingers and your wrist up in this way, the thermometer temperature goes down. So it's a little bit of an inverse thing. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. So very good. Got a good score there. Very good. But do those make sense though? Yes. Okay.
I have to make sure that the caregiver is also aware, so he can encourage him while he's, playing.
Yeah, and just to remind you guys too, whenever you pause the screen, so if you want to touch the screen really quickly, and I can just show you this. So there's also a tutorial. So you guys can all also there's written instructions there, and then you can hit the tutorial, and that will launch a video of us explaining how to actually play the game.
Oh, okay.
So that's a good resource for you guys. If for whatever reason I'm not here to explain a game, you can always go through and watch that tutorial. It will help you.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Do you see any difference in terms of? Okay. Do you see? He's just complaining. I'm tired.
Okay.
In terms of like you changing the adjustments, do you see any?
Able to move a lot more. A lot more movement. Yeah. So we got about consistently about 5 or 6 more degrees of extension than before, which is really good. In terms of the amount of assistance, I think we're about the same, which is pretty good. That means we're requiring about the same amount of assistance. And that's something that we'll track over time. It's going to be hard to see a change instantaneously across like one day. What we'll be doing is we'll be tracking that amount of assistance. And so the kind of patterns we expect to see are increases in range of motion and a decrease in the amount of assistance that's required. What that means is that able to move more and you need less help, basically. This is really what we want, more independence.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Nick. I appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
yeah, of course. Yeah. And I'm glad I was able to kind of walk through a couple of those games. So very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So Brian, I'm actually going to come back over to you real quick. It looks like Brian, Carm, and Robin, same boat. And so they are the same sort of experience with extensions. They're more impaired side, or I guess the more impaired movement. And so yeah, that's a very, very common experience to have that extension come back slower than the flexion. A very, very common experience there. So Brian, I'll be watching your movements coming through here. I see that you are playing, so keep playing, doing your rehab. I'm going to quickly go over here to answer a couple questions. I think we have a guest in the Rehab Power Hour, Dustin, I think. Dustin, are you able to hear me? I think, Dustin, you are on mute, so there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Excellent. Well, Dustin, welcome to the Rehab Power Hour. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm from Canada.
Okay.
And
welcome.
I was wondering how or what how I can get these.
Sure. Well, first of all, Dustin, thanks so much for getting in touch with us. And I think if you wouldn't mind, maybe tell me a little bit about you. Do you have anyone there who you'd like to introduce? Hey.
Hi.
Well, so Dustin, tell me about you and when did you have your neurologic injury?
Going on a year.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about what's going on with you in terms of, are you having difficulties moving your upper extremity, your arm and your hand, or more of your leg and ankle?
The fuck.
He's got a lot of trouble with his arm. He doesn't have a ton of movement in his arm and hand. Just recently he's been able to kind of just lift it up.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I also heard somebody else talking. They said about being able to kind of lift and squeeze maybe, but not being able to release it. Same with him. And
yeah, that's honestly, guys, I've been working with stroke survivors for a long time. That's the most common presentation, right? That's the most common type of impairment where we have that flexion posture, that flexion tone will kick in, you're able to squeeze, but not able to release, and that release the fingers and the wrist and extend. So very, very common. And that's one of the reasons why the Hand Mentor is designed the way it is. And so it actually is designed to have that assistance into that extension to help you kind of overpower those strong flexors and help kind of break that tone, to help give you that ability to move into those extension ranges of motion. So it is designed specifically for stroke survivors for the upper extremity. And I think a good question you guys had about how can you get it? This is a good question. And I think we're right now, I think we have focused primarily on the US marketplace right now and helping stroke survivors in the United States. There are some reasons for that. I think there are some regulatory things and making sure that we are I guess, able to provide a medical device to individuals in Canada. And it looks like we potentially do have ways to get hand mentors to you guys. So if it's something that would be you'd be interested in doing, we can certainly reach out. I think we have our one of our clinician experts, sort of our technical team, will be able to reach out to you guys and kind of figure out the details of your specific situation. So I think for individuals who are outside the United States, we try to handle this on a case-by-case basis, just because there might be some, idiosyncrasies of shipping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we can certainly talk after Rehab Power Hour, and we will do our best to get you guys a hand mentor, and if that's something that you guys are interested in.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think this is not necessarily to exclude anyone else. We would love to get hand mentors out to anyone in Europe, in China, anywhere. We know that stroke affects everyone across the world, and so we're trying our best to serve everyone that we can. And so we'd love to work with you guys in Canada. What part of Canada are you calling from, by the way?
Saskatchewan.
Okay, all right. I'm not familiar with that. I've been to Ontario. I love it there. It's beautiful, and so I'll have to come up and visit you guys in Saskatchewan. Yeah.
It's cold here. Don't bother.
Oh, I always went there in the summer, guys. So yeah.
a blizzard out right now, so
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, I mean, thank you so much, guys, for being here. I think what we'll do is I'll be sure to have one of our clinical experts reach out to you guys, and
Yeah.
we'll be sure to get kind of the details of getting you guys a hand mentor worked out as best we can. Okay.
okay.
Excellent. You guys are more than welcome to stay on. I think we have a couple more guests I'm going to get to, I think. But if you guys have any more questions, let me know. Stay on and drop me a line. I'd love to chat with you guys more.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks, guys. Just a quick reintroduction. I think we are running past our 9 o'clock hour, so thanks as always for sticking around with me. Just a quick reminder, this is your Rehab Power Hour. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Housley. So thanks so much for being here. If you have any sort of final questions, post them in the live stream now. I'll be sure to get to them. And if not, I will be sure to answer them in our next Rehab Power Hour, which is scheduled for Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. But I want to get over to Beth really quickly. Now, Beth, can you hear me? Let's see, Beth. I hope, Beth, we have your audio still. Maybe we have lost Beth. That's okay. Hopefully, Beth, you were able to see this when you are watching the Rehab Power Hour recordings. I would love to talk with you, so feel free to come back on our Rehab Power Hour coming up on Wednesday. Very good. So I'm going to quickly reach back out to Brian and see how things are going. Brian, how are those adjustments going?
Well, it kind of felt about the same, but I was thinking maybe what I need to do is adjust my frustration